While the MCU has a lot of movies, shows, and special presentations, what if it had more? Every fan of the MCU likes to talk about what projects they would greenlight, so I thought it'd be fun to make a video where I explain the projects that I would have greenlit if I was in charge of the MCU after Phase 3. Now I know Phases 4 and 5 already had a ton of films and stuff, but this is just for fun. Now to set up some rules. I can only move the release date of a single MCU project. Everything else stays the same. Also, no X-Men stuff, because while I'd obviously love the X-Men to show up in the MCU, I think it's best to wait until after Secret Wars to properly introduce them. And to limit myself, I can only add a single film, 3 shows, and a special presentation to each phase. Oh, and no direct sequels, so no Moon Knight Season 2, Miss Marvel Season 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 4, etc. And no Hulk films, because I don't really know who owns the rights to a Hulk film. I think Marvel now owns them, but Universal still might, I'm not sure. Anyways, let's begin. The first show that I want to talk about is Black Widows. This would be an 8-episode limited series taking place a month or two after Black Widow, showing Yelena, Red Guardian, Milena, and Taskmaster freeing Black Widow agents all across the globe. Now you're probably wondering, why? Why this show? Well, it's because this show would serve to give these characters some more development. Yelena's fine because with Thunderbolts, she'll have been in 3 different projects, but Red Guardian, Milena, and Taskmaster, well, they haven't really gotten a chance to do all that much. Now yes, Red Guardian, Milena, and Taskmaster will be in Thunderbolts, but if rumors are to be believed, Taskmaster isn't making out of the film's first act, and I don't think audiences are gonna care if she dies, because the only thing we've seen her in previously was Black Widow, and she was just a brainwashed soldier that didn't say anything. This would be a good chance to get audiences to care about Taskmaster, and would make her presumed death in Thunderbolts actually hit fans. Also, I don't think Milena is going to be in Thunderbolts for more than like a scene or 2, so why not give her some time bonding with Yelena? And as for Red Guardian, this would be a chance to show him be more serious and less of a goofball, although you could still, have him be silly. This show would also be a good place to give some of the named Black Widow agents some personalities and dialogue, like Loretto, Helen, and Sonya. In fact, Sonya could be one of the Black Widow agents they free in the show. The way I envision this show is that the series would be split up into 2 halves, each half being focused on freeing a different Black Widow agent. As for the show's villain, that would be Viper. The plot of the show would involve Viper leading a Hydra remnant group and using Black Widow agents for her own means, now that the Red Room was destroyed. Viper wouldn't die in this show, and would return in future projects. As for when this show would air, I'm thinking January to February of 2022, so in between No Way Home and Moon Knight. The next show I want to talk about is The 10 Rings. This would be a 10-episode limited series taking place a few months after Shang-Chi, centered around Shu Xialing leading the 10 Rings. I know I butchered her name, I'm sorry. Now I know that this was one of those shows that was rumored, but at this point, I don't think we're gonna get this show. The show would be about Xialing rebuilding the 10 Rings into a slightly less bad version of the 10 Rings. She would be an anti-hero of sorts. She's still the leader of a criminal empire, but she has morals. Other characters in this series would include Razor Fist and Raza. Raza's appearance would be used to show how Xialing deals with 10 Ring operations in other parts of the world. As to why this show, for starters, we've never gotten anything like this in the MCU. a show focused on a criminal empire with morally questionable people. It would have a pretty unique tone and feel to it. Also, it would keep audiences invested in this side of the MCU. And this show would also reintroduce Iron Fist. Yeah, the way I envision this show is that Danny Rand, or Iron Fist, would be almost like an antagonist. He's trying to stop whatever the Ten Rings are doing, but there would also be a more proper antagonist in the show, the Hand. Yeah, this show would also bring back the Hand. Maybe there's a war going on between the Ten Rings and the Hand, and Iron Fist is forced to work with the Ten Rings by the end of the show to prevent the Hand from doing something evil. But the Ten Rings aren't trying to stop the Hand because they're good guys. They would have something to gain from stopping them, like gaining some land or some artifact. Regardless, after they defeat the Hand, the Ten Rings could then backstab Iron Fist, and the show would end with Iron Fist heading to California to tell Shang-Chi about what his sister's doing. This would obviously lead into a Shang-Chi 2. As for when this show would air, I'm thinking it would air from November 2022 to January of 2023. The next show I want to talk about is Marvel One-Shots. This would be a show kind of like the Tales of series for Star Wars. A series of short animated episodes airing all in a single night, or maybe 3 per week. But unlike Tales of, where the show is split into 2 different 3-episode stories, this would be 9 one-shots, each focused on a supporting character in the MCU. I think something like this is important, because there's a lot of supporting characters in the MCU that fans want to see more of, but for whatever reason, we just don't. Also, it would serve to give prequel stories to various characters, and the best part is, we could literally get a Marvel One-Shots series with every phase, similar to What If. Here's a quick rundown of the 9 episode ideas I have. Episode 1 would be The Astonishing Ant-Man. Basically, it would be a prequel about Hank becoming Ant-Man and Janet becoming Wasp. The next episode would be called The Way It Began, which would be about T'Chaka's first time as Black Panther and how he first came into conflict with Klaw. The third episode would be called The Warriors 3, and as the name suggests, it would be a prequel set a few years before the events of Thor 1, about the Warriors 3 and Sif fighting some kind of threat that's attacking Asgard. The fourth episode would be called Stonekeeper. This would be set right after the first Avenger, and would be about Red Skull becoming the Stonekeeper, going through various visions and stuff like that. It would be a very trippy episode, maybe even an episode with limited dialogue. Episode 5 would be called Not Everyone Had the Avengers. This would be set a few years after Captain Marvel, and be about her saving a planet from the villain Black Roger, with some help from Star Fox and Pip the Troll. The next episode would be called Escape to Madripoor. This would be set during the Blip, and explore Sharon Carter's time in Madripoor becoming the Power Broker. The next episode would be called The Second Daughter. This episode would be about Nebula after the events of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and would have flashbacks showing her time working for Thanos. The next episode would be called Ghost Story, and tell the story of how Black Widow came into conflict with the Winter Soldier during a job in Ukraine. And the final episode would be called Mad Titan, and would simply just be Thanos' origin story. As for when this show would air, I'm thinking May 2022, so right between Doctor Strange 2 and Ms. Marvel. For the special presentation, I'm thinking Planet Hulk. While titled Planet Hulk, this obviously wouldn't be a full-on adaptation of that storyline. Taking place between Age of Ultron and Thor Ragnarok, this special presentation would show Hulk's time on Sakaar, and feature supporting characters like Valkyrie, Grandmaster, and Korg. This special presentation would also introduce the character of Kiera, Hulk's wife and the mother of Scar. Like in the Planet Hulk storyline, she would die in this special while pregnant with Scar. The way I envision this story is Hulk just wants to settle down with his wife, but the Grandmaster really wants him to be a gladiator. So he orchestrates a plot to frame the rising champion Red King for the murder of Hulk's wife. He chooses Red King because Red King wants to eventually take over Sakaar, and Grandmaster can't just kill him because the people would be pretty upset and possibly revolt. So getting Hulk to kill Red King in the arena is the best option. For those that don't know, Red King is the main antagonist of the Planet Hulk comic storyline. I think this special presentation would be really cool, because not only would it pay tribute to one of the best Hulk storylines, but it would also just serve as a really good prequel to Thor Ragnarok. Also, just like in the comics, the after-credits scene would reveal that Scar survived, thanks to his mother using her powers on him. As for its release, I'm thinking July 2022, right between Ms. Marvel and Thor 4. As for the film that I would add to Phase 4, that would be Captain Britain. Captain Britain's been a character that many people have been asking for in the MCU, and I think it's about time we introduce him. I'll be the first to admit, I don't know the most about Captain Britain, but I do know that he has a history with the group Strike. In the comics, Strike is a counter-terrorism group in the UK, kind of like the UK's equivalent to S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, Strike is technically in the MCU. It's the team that Rumlow leads in Winter Soldier and Endgame, but this can easily be ignored. Just have a throwaway line about how, the Yanks had their own Strike, but this is a better version of Strike. Strike could even have Di Thomas as its leader. In the comics, he's a detective who, for a while, wasn't the biggest fan of superheroes, and because of that, Thomas could butt heads with Captain Britain. Like Captain Britain's saving the day, but then Strike would step in and consider him a threat. Similar to how Damage Control acts in the MCU, but by the end of the film, Thomas could learn to trust Captain Britain. Also, I'm thinking the third Union Jack, Joseph Chapman, could be a member of Strike in the MCU, and maybe he abandons Strike midway through the film, because he disagrees with Thomas about Captain Britain. This would lead to him becoming Union Jack. As for the film's main antagonist, I'm thinking that we connect this film with the supernatural side of the MCU. So how about a vampire, Baron Blood? But not the original Baron Blood, although I guess he could, have a brief cameo. But the second Baron Blood, Chapman's childhood friend, Kenneth Crichton. Also, the villain Vixen could be a side villain in this film, a bad guy that Captain Britain battles at the end of the first act, and could lead into his first conflict with Strike. As for this film's release, I would release it in September 2022, right between She-Hulk and Werewolf by Night. Moving on to Phase 5, the first show I want to talk about is Ghost Rider. It's crazy that a Ghost Rider show hasn't happened yet. I know that there was going to be an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spin-off show for Hulu centered around Robbie Reyes, but that got cancelled. Now, is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. still canon? Honestly, I don't know. It can fit into canon, but only just barely, and Marvel's been kinda weird with those ABC shows. So in order to avoid that discussion, this show would take place in the 2000s, and would be the origin for Johnny Blaze. Or at least, the first episode would be. This wouldn't be one of those shows where he finally becomes Ghost Rider at the end of the show. No. After the first episode, he's Ghost Rider, and the rest of the show is him kicking some ass. This series would be 8 episodes long, and feature Blackheart as the main antagonist, with Mephisto being like Thanos in Guardians of the Galaxy 1. He shows up to give Blackheart some orders, also to give Johnny his powers, and that's kind of it. The show would set him up as the Thanos of sorts for the supernatural side of the MCU, the villain of the eventual Midnight Suns film. This show would be released from August to September 2023, right between Secret Invasion and Loki Season 2. The next show I want to talk about is Jack Flag. This is probably the most out there pitch in the video. This would be an 8-episode series about the character Jack Flag. Now, why Jack Flag? He's not exactly an important Marvel character. Well, I think this is a good place to introduce him, even if he's not very important in the grand scheme of things. For starters, in the comics, his first real foe were the Serpent Society, a group that was just introduced in Phase 5. They would be the main antagonists of the series, but not Sidewinder. Maybe he could cameo, but I think this would be a good place for Diamondback and Cobra, the characters that Rosa Salazar and Seth Rollins were meant to play in Brave New World before they were cut from the film. They could be high-ranking members of the Serpent Society that Jack Flag takes down, which is why they're not in Brave New World. The show would end with Jack Flag getting teleported into space. Like, maybe the Serpent Society is working on some teleportation device, and the final battle has Jack defeating Cobra and Diamondback while fighting in the device. And after defeating them, he's exhausted, but he's still in the device. That's when Sidewinder would appear and activate the machine, teleporting Flag into space. He would then leave Cobra and Diamondback behind to get arrested due to their failure to defeat Flag. The post-credits scene would then be Flag waking up in nowhere. This would lead to him becoming a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy in a future project. As for why this project, I think it's a cool idea to do kind of like a reverse of Star-Lord. Star-Lord has no powers, and was part of the cosmic side of the MCU for a while, and is now presumably going to take part in more Earth-based stories. And Jack Flag has no powers, and would be part of Earth-based stories, only for him to then get sent up into space to take part in cosmic stories. It's like the cosmic and Earth sides of the MCU did a character swap. As for when this show would air, I would say July to August of 2024, right between Echo and Deadpool and Wolverine, but maybe not between Echo and Deadpool and Wolverine, because there's a show that I would put between Echo and Jack Flag, that being Heroes for Hire. Now, I understand that in this hypothetical timeline that I've created, Iron Fist was last seen going to warn Shang-Chi about what the Ten Rings are doing, so this show would take place before the Ten Rings show. This series would obviously be about Iron Fist and Luke Cage's Heroes for Hire team from the comics, and would be 8 to 9 episodes long. The show would follow the pair, along with their supporting characters, like Misty Knight and Colleen Wing. As for the show's villain, that would be Master Khan. He would be manipulating various characters throughout the show to become more and more powerful in the criminal world of New York City. Some of the characters that he manipulates could be characters from previous shows, like Madame Gao, who would be revealed to be alive and leading the Hand in New York City. Maybe members of the Wrecking Crew from She-Hulk could be some of these characters that he manipulates. Hell, maybe he even manipulates Orson Randall. For those that don't know, Orson Randall is a former Iron Fist in the comics who's mostly known for his dual handguns. He was actually planned to appear in Iron Fist Season 3 before that got cancelled, so this could be a good time to introduce the character. As for the show's structure, I'm thinking it has almost like a Monster of the Week style approach. Every episode is Luke and Danny fighting a different villain, with the ongoing narrative being them figuring out who Master Khan is. As for when this show would air, I would say April to May 2024, so yeah, between Echo and Jack Flag. As for the special presentation of Phase 5, that would be Legend of the Black Knight. This is the pitch that I'm going to spend the least amount of time on, because there's not really much to explain. This would be a prequel to Eternals, and show the origin of the sword in Dane Whitman's possession, the Ebony Blade. For those that don't know, Whitman in the comics is the hero Black Knight, and the title of the Black Knight has been passed down for centuries, with the first Black Knight being Percival of Scandia, and this special presentation would be about Percival of Scandia getting the Ebony Blade and going on his first adventure as the Black Knight. Similar to how Werewolf by Night was a tribute to monster films of the 1930s and 40s, and how the Guardians Holiday Special was a tribute to Christmas films, this would be a tribute to medieval films, so it would have a very different feeling from everything else in the MCU. The final scene of the presentation could literally just be the after-credits scene from Eternals, copy and pasted over. This special presentation would be released in August of 2024, so between Deadpool and Wolverine and Agatha All Along. And as for the film that I would add to Phase 5, this is actually where I would push an existing Marvel project. I would push Fantastic Four into November of 2025, and in August of 2025, there would be an Avengers film about Sam rebuilding the Avengers. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Avengers Doomsday is releasing in May 2026. Releasing 3 Avengers films within a year of each other might be too much. And to that I say, maybe. But I think this is worth the risk. Part of the problem with Doomsday is that we're either going to have an Avengers team assembled off-screen, or the film will take part of its runtime to build the Avengers. And I'm not really a fan of either option, so why not make a lower stakes Avengers film to set up the team? Now for the plot. So remember how Red Skull just leaves after Infinity War? What if after that film, he was teleported to Earth by whatever power was holding him there, now that his job was done? Red Skull, now on Earth, joins forces with Viper's Hydra group and secretly builds an empire. A secret empire. Yup, the film would be called Avengers Secret Empire, but it wouldn't be an adaptation of Secret Empire, it would just take the name. The film would also have 2 more villains, the first being Sin. After Red Skull returns to Earth, he adopts a 15-year-old girl whose parents were killed in the snap. He raises her, and when the blip occurs, she doesn't want to leave Hydra because by this point, she's completely brainwashed into the organization. So since this film would take place in 2027, she would be 24 by this time, and the final villain of the film would be William Burnside. For those that don't know, in the comics, William Burnside was a Captain America after Steve Rogers, who fought against communist countries like the Soviet Union. He would later be reintroduced in the comics as a villain, with the faulty super soldier serum he took turning him into a racist. He would then get brainwashed by far-right extremist groups, and become even more bigoted. As for the character's MCU history created for this film, let's say a decade or 2 after Steve went MIA, the US tries to start up the Super Soldier program again, and Burnside is chosen to become the new Captain America. Burnside is already a very bigoted man, and he would go on Black Ops missions for the US military, and in one of these missions, he would battle the Red Guardian, which would confirm that Red Guardian was telling the truth all along about fighting Captain America. It just wasn't Steve Rogers he fought. After a while, the faulty super soldier serum given to him starts to take effect, and he begins to lose his mind, so the US puts him in cryosleep and forgets about him. Then we cut to the opening scene of Avengers Secret Empire. Burnside wakes up with Sin, disguised as a nurse, attending to him. Burnside rushes out of this makeshift hospital and walks out into the busy streets of wherever this secret Hydra base is located. This would be an almost one-to-one recreation of Steve's awakening from First Avenger, but instead of being filled with wonder and amazement like Steve, Burnside is disgusted by what he sees. People of color, LGBT people, and people of different religions all walking around freely. Red Skull would then approach him and offer him a position in Hydra to make the world go back to what Burnside is comfortable with. Eventually in the film, he would even wear the Secret Empire Captain America uniform. So those are the film's villains. But what about the Avengers lineup? Well, we already know that Sam and Torres would be in the team. The other members would be Ant-Man, Spider-Man, War Machine, She-Hulk, Shang-Chi, and Yelena. Hulk would be in more of a support role in the film, kinda like Maria Hill in the first two Avengers films, and Red Guardian would just have a cameo in the film where he would mention how he fought against Burnside. As for characters like Miss Marvel, Ironheart, Kate Bishop, Wiccan, Cassie Lang, and America Chavez, they're obviously going to be in the Young Avengers team, or Champions, or whatever they're going to end up calling it. They can have cameos in the film. I mean, I'm all for more Miss Marvel and Kate Bishop content, but I don't think that they should be full-on members, as of right now at least. Miss Marvel could maybe help out during the opening fight or something, kinda like how Wong helped out Strange, Iron Man, and Spider-Man in the beginning of Infinity War, but that would be basically it. As for White Vision, Hawkeye, Star-Lord, Shuri, Captain Britain, and Captain Marvel, this would be released before Vision Quest, so we can't use Vision. Hawkeye is retired, and I doubt anyone knows that Star-Lord is on Earth. Shuri is probably busy dealing with her own stuff in Wakanda. Same goes with Captain Britain with the UK, and Captain Marvel with space. As for Thor, I assume he's busy raising love. Also, Thor and Captain Marvel are far too powerful for this story. And that's all I have for the pitch for Avengers Secret Empire. So what do you guys think about these pitches? I think that they're all pretty good, but you know, I'm pretty biased. They're my ideas. Also, given all the rules that I gave in the beginning of the video, what would you guys do if you had to add a film, 3 shows, and a special presentation to phases 4 and 5? Leave your thoughts and your plans in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.